Insider.
Welcome to The Inside. This is the Insum Insider, your source for Oracle Apex tips, techniques, methodology, and really wherever that discussion takes us. I'm your host, Monty, coming to you from the shadow of Oracle headquarters. With me today is my good friend and member of the Insum family, Michelle Scamity. Hello, Michelle.
Hello, Monty.
At the helm, keeping us on time and task, is our producer, French-Canadian, Mark Rule. Mark, we appreciate everything you do for us. It's Thursday, January 28th, Season 2, Episode 2, and thank you for spending a piece of your afternoon with us. We're worldwide today, coming to you live on YouTube and Facebook. The Insum Insider is, of course, sponsored by Insum, and thus the name. If you're doing anything at all with Apex and you need a lifeline, reach out to us. We offer everything from coaching and mentoring all the way through turnkey project management and development. We're laser focused on Apex and have been since 2004. Michelle, on the docket today is the venerable Oracle Forms, the grand old dog. Lots out there owe their careers to Oracle Forms and Oracle reports. I certainly do. It's very common to see people in the Apex community arrive by way of the Forms community.
Yep.
What about you? Did you do anything with Forms on your journey to Apex?
I didn't. I'm one of those straight to Apex kind of people.
Well, I personally, I know you've been working with Apex a long time, but generally speaking, I think the longer you've been working with Apex, the greater the chance that you came from the Forms community. It may be coincidence, but that's kind of what I've seen. If most of the time, you're already skilled in PL SQL. Like if you're a Forms developer, you know SQL and you know PL SQL. That makes you a great Forms developer.
Logical transition, right?
Very logical. I mean, guess what? That makes you you show up at Apex with already a really good foundation if you know SQL and PL SQL.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got two people here that we're going to have us join real quickly. Francis Mignault and Mia Urman.
Shall I bring them on right away?
Well, please do.
All right. Here's Francis.
Hey, guys.
Hello, Mia.
Hello.
Francis.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's always great, Francis. You're a regular on the Insider, but Mia, we're thrilled to have you participate on the Insider today with us. You and I have history. We served on the board, the ODTUG board, and it's really been a pleasure getting to know you over these years. Again, it's great to have you join us. The topic that we have for us today is, it seems like it's a topic that we've talked about for years, but at the same time, it seems incredibly timely, because you see companies right now today faced with these decisions, what their strategic decisions about what they're going to do going forward. So let's start out like this, Mia. Let's, if you would, introduce yourself, and more importantly, introduce AuraPlayer, and let us, let the people know what AuraPlayer is all about and what services you offer.
Sure. So my name is Mia Urman. I'm from AuraPlayer, but I'm a longtime Oracle geek. I'm actually one of the very few Oracle ACE directors around. You have a company full of them, but not a lot of women out there. And basically, I started my career as an Oracle help desk phone support. If you guys remember that, right? When people used to call and say, Oracle Forms doesn't work, before Google had all the answers, and before ladies not supposed to divulge her age, but I would say, hello, this is me at Oracle. How can I help you today? And people used to say, take this bag of junk and get it out of our headquarters. Nothing's working. And we had to talk them down from the tree, half psychology, half technology, we used to say. But basically, that was my start for Oracle Forms. And as I moved on, it was always about Oracle Forms Modernization. So that's why I always laugh now when people talk about Forms Modernization. literally in 1998, we are talking about Oracle Forms Modernization. That's what I was doing, helping people from Forms 3.0 to 4.5, and it was all about modernization, and we shouldn't be in character mode anymore, and on and on. So literally, I've been saying the same sentences for 25 years, but each time with new innovation. So, where in the past it was move to 4.5, move to 6, move to 11, move to Forms 12, Forms with Portal, Forms with mobile, Forms with chat, Forms with whatever. And now I'm excited for this next chapter, which is really people trying to do migrations completely off of Forms. And what should their next generation platform be? And the minute we started getting into that, I, of course, approached my longtime friends, partners at Insum to really start investigating that relationship between bringing the complexity of Forms to the world of Apex more and more. So AuraPlayer, as a company, we do modernization of Oracle Forms, but really we have a piece of software that allows us to wrap Oracle Forms business processes as REST, SOAP, JSON services that could then easily plug in to next generation front ends like Apex, especially now with the newer versions of Apex, right? We don't need to rely on SOAP anymore. And basically what it does is it allows people to have risk-free phased migrations to new technologies because they don't need to try to take the sauce out of the spaghetti from the Oracle Forms complexity, right? We could start with the easy things, right? The things that are easy to reverse engineer. You guys know how to do that. Apex has wizards, the 20% we do pretty quickly. And then we're stuck with all that spaghetti code that was done, 20 years ago, where Ed is the only one who knew how to manage it and maintain it. And Ed retired 4 years ago, but maybe he'll answer our phone.
Everybody is just looking for Ed. Where is Ed?
It's like, and Ed didn't document anything because Ed wanted job security, right? So he didn't put one thing down on paper for the last 10 years of his career because he was afraid that someone would kick him out if anything was written down, right? So basically we come in like, Monty, you're going to bust something over there. I think Monty was an Ed. No, were you an Ed? I was an Ed at a company.
Yeah, that used to be pretty commonplace actually, because everybody kind of had their specialties. Francis, you're so identified with Apex, but you've got a Forms background too. Would you?
Yes. The same kind of a story for me. I started not at Oracle, but I started working with Oracle Forms like 2.3, and then editing the .inps, and then there was
me. That's impressive.
Branching and whatnot, no conditional or no triggers or anything. So that long time ago, I started on Forms. So yeah, I know the whole story about. And like you say, we've been talking like 3.0 was like a big version for Forms, and then the web part and whatnot. And then that's one of the reasons why we started with Apex actually, because at first we built this software for association management, and then we tried it out with Forms web and everything, and then that's when we found out about HTMLDB. So
let's say, were you at WebDB or were you in Apex?
We did WebDB and then Apex, and HTMLDB actually that is Apex, that became Apex afterwards.
Yeah, I was going to say, I worked at Oracle like when there was a project that they wanted to do called Project Cherokee.
Wow.
So they were so it was a product that was out for 25 seconds, pretty much. Basically, the whole concept was going to be that the canvases of Forms was going to be HTML based. So they were going to like get rid of the canvas, make HTML, but keep the form the same. I get up on stage. So, I'm at Oracle Israel. I'm like the tools, I'm in charge of all the middleware, and it was Internet World in Israel. And I said, this just came out in beta. They're like, no, everyone's going to want it. All of Israel's doing, I think it was back in the 90s, like, 892 or something. I get up, I do this like great presentation, hundreds, there must have been, 400 people. The next day, everybody's calling, and Oracle says, yeah, we're not actually going to release that product. We have ADF and HTMLDB, and we don't want to cannibalize, two of these development streams we're doing.
Oh.
So that was the end of that. there were a lot of angry people, but yeah, so that's why we started doing HTML-DB, and that became Portal.
And how did you get to the AuraPlayer part? Why building such a tool of generating like this layer of web services on top? How
Right.
did
So
this come?
we actually discovered it the hard way, right? So I was known as like Forms girl because I was in Israel. Basically, I knew almost all the Forms people. I'd been in phone support for 7 years, and at the time, Oracle started saying Forms is end of life. Okay, 2005, Oracle basically came out and said we are redeveloping all of ERP as Fusion apps. Sorry, we're discontinuing Forms within the next 2 years, 5, whatever it is. And all of the Oracle world went berserk with Forms because they've been paying millions of dollars many years, huge systems. Okay, I was doing the Israeli Treasury and the bank, discount bank, and the Ministry of Agriculture and New York City Transit, and you can't really go to these people and say, oh, by the way, your mission critical system is going to be end of life in 2 years. Good luck, right? So I started helping them to do redevelopment. Basically, you see these projects after about a year, we're just still in the design phase, right? People started trying to reverse engineer these processes, these banking algorithms. Half of it's in Forms, half of it's in the database, half of it's in triggers, half of it is connecting to things externally. The people who develop them are not really there anymore. And I saw so many projects start in development in .NET. And what happens is you get these quick wins because some of the forms are pretty small and they're just based on database. And you get these quick wins and they say, oh, look, we're getting there. And then the minute you get to the heart of the applications, they're so complex. They're the key to the stability and the risk of the organization, and no one will touch it. No one will let you touch it. So I saw one project developed for 2 years in .NET. Then they said, oh, .NET isn't good. That's why we're having trouble migrating the forms. We'll do it in Java. They did it a year in Java. And then they came back to us and they said, okay, just joking. So what we essentially tried to do is say, look, nobody thinks you're going to continue to develop in Forms for the rest of your life, on the one hand. On the other hand, you don't see banks leaving mainframe even today, right? They have tons of systems in mainframe, but what does it do? It sits in the corner. It turns into almost a database, business logic piece of middleware, and you skin it, right? You put a new front end, user-friendly, incredible user experience that is able to run the business processes, get the data it needs, and update in the same fashion. So basically, I was working in a bank at the time. I was working at MasterCard. They had, again, they have 1,800 call center people answering the phones 24/7, 99.9 uptime. Tell them that they're now going to do a 5-year redevelopment program to do that in another language. I mean, it's, and they make moves to production twice a day. So it was just, the whole thing was crazy. So what we did is we created this piece of software that basically allows us to wrap the Oracle Forms as at first it was as a SOAP service, because then it was SOA, right? And everyone was doing SOA at the time. Then we did it in REST. Then people said, oh no, we need JSON. Now we have Swagger, which again is a way to incorporate UI features as well, that we could say what the data type is it a date item, what fields is it? And basically what we do is we break apart Forms from being this big black box that's Forms that has to run as a Java applet to being a series of business processes, right? Get item inventory and the item number, create new customer, do ship confirm, request vacation days, right? And then each one of those things could be called literally separately. It's almost like putting a package spec. For those of you who understand PLSQL, it's like putting a package spec on top of Oracle Forms, where you know what's going on inside, right? You know that you need to send to the Forms these 3 bits of information, and you get back from the Forms these 5 bits of information, and you could use that information in Apex to literally create any type of front end, user interface, graph, whatever it is. And then that way, if you still want to migrate away the whole thing, be my guest. Take the next 10 years, 5 years, whatever it is, because a REST service, as we know, is basically separating out the front end of the form from the business logic section of the form. And that business logic could easily in however long it takes you to reverse engineer it, put it in the database, use ORDs, and plug it into the same Apex form you did. But at least this way, it doesn't take you 5 to 10 years to get your first your foot off the ground.
It gives you some options, right? It gives you some options to migrate or move or add or so. In that white paper we did, like it's all about different options of what do you do with your forms, because like you said, forms is still there. There's still releases coming out, and then but it's not like using the latest technology, or I would say the latest approach of real web approach. So I think there's still part of forms that is good that can be used. So there's different options basically to go from forms to other things. And I know that in the past we used to say that let's convert the whole thing and then move to a new technology. But like you say, once you get your hands into it, it gets quite complex in certain areas, and then you might not be able to reproduce the same kind of thing in
you
other
have to say you had a black beard before you started migrating.
Yeah, hair and beard and black beard.
Yeah, so Francis, you mentioned the white paper, and there might be people watching today that actually don't know that AuraPlayer and Insum, well, Mia and you collaborated on a white paper recently, and Mark's put the link up here on the screen that sort of outlines some of your options for modernizing forms. So like as you say, Mia, that there's a lot of synergy between some of the work that you do and the work we do in the Apex world, sort of to help bridge that gap for and ease the pain of these organizations that want to modernize their forms. So we encourage you to check that white paper out, and maybe that's something that we can talk about today, some of those options that are available to
So to set the table a bit, we used to think like, again, there was one solution out of forms. We used to say that you have forms, that's good there, right?
The boxing gloves. I forgot the boxing gloves. I should have.
Yeah.
Apex versus.
Yeah, exactly. Versus the other. But I think all of this can work together. And now our approach is more of what makes the most sense. Do you want to? Some people need to migrate the whole thing, but some others they want to do it in phases, or you want to keep what's there, or so there's different approach there. And then I like the approach of the white paper of saying, look, what do you want to do? And you really have different options. It's not like you're stuck with forms, or you have to go or train or whatnot, right?
I think it's the definitive word, actually, Francis. I mean, what I appreciate most about what you and Mia put together was that you did lay out the options. That's what people want. People want to know all the facts, and then they want to make their decision about what's going to work best for their company. And I think you guys nailed it. And as far as the do this, Apex good, forms bad. I was right there in the middle of that argument, and it's just not accurate anymore. My own personal thoughts, and I think I can say Insum's as well, is we're much more elastic now. Much more elastic. It's not a one size fits all. There could be situations where somebody needs to just upgrade to Forms, go on the Forms cloud, and never even mention Apex. There's other situations where they need to come all the way over to Apex, and a million companies in between. They're going to make the decision that's best for them.
And I think if I can mention the white paper again, I think one thing that we did in there was actually say there is no one-stop solution, and for each one there are things to consider. Yes, this is right for you if this is if these are your parameters, but maybe you want to consider this for these reasons. So I think there was some good positioning in the white paper for that.
Yeah. It's like you said, if people have a primarily in-house application, they're using their desktop, they need to do a lot of printing, they need to access a lot of the desktop objects, right? They need to open Word, open Excel, whatever. There's tons of use cases where the desktop is king. And we were talking about when Oracle said they were going to redevelop everything into Fusion. As we all know, that never actually happens, right? Oracle Forms, Oracle eBusiness Suite 12 is still in Forms and will continue to be in Forms, I think, for the next 2 versions at least, because they came to the same conclusions, right? They said things like order entry, manufacturing, warehousing, whatever. All of these were very complex. And a lot of them needed, direct to printing, print labels and things of that nature, where, it's hard to do that in Apex without, third-party plugins and things like that. So as you mentioned in the white paper, I think it was really interesting to really work together on this, because like I said, I've been working alongside everybody at the conference for many years, right? We had booths next to each other. So I've seen, how professional and how incredible the projects you guys started with Oracle Forms. And, the first year you're like, yeah, it's going great. The second year you're like, yeah, it's going great. There's a few challenges. By year 3, you're like, well, there's a few roadblocks, right? And as more time goes on and you guys got deeper into the spaghetti, like, you started asking us more and more about our solution.
And we just spent our time looking for Ed.
Right.
By year 4, we're just like, where's Ed?
Where's Ed?
Where's Ed?
Yeah,
Sorry to any Eds in the audience. It's not you.
But I was really impressed with how professional, like, you never came and banged your head against the wall. You kind of were still very professional, keeping the customer first, researching all the different technologies there. We've done stuff in the past with chat and Apex and, forms and Apex and stuff like that. So for me, it was natural to come to you guys the minute we started really wanting to look for a solution that was going to be something that was going to be a smooth transition for Forms, for our Forms community, right? We have a big Forms community blog, etc. So that's why we had no problem recommending Apex and bringing you guys as part of our modernization.
It just makes sense, right? You want to find the best solution for the project, for the need of the client. And then what happens is, like, we saw that every time we came up with huge estimates, and then it was like year projects, and it was kind of never ending type of thing to convert the whole thing. So I really think it makes more sense of just, what do you need? What are you looking for? Do you need some just more better dashboards, or, mobile applications, or link to other systems using web services, which is way easier using ORDS and an Apex. So I think, and I like to say when I present about Forms modernization, I like to say that you have Oracle Forms, you actually are paying for Oracle Apex, because it comes with a database. So why not use it? I mean, they work, it's from the same vendor, it's all supported. I mean, they should be able to work together, right? So, and
like Monty said, you likely have a lot of the skills. So you're in a good position to start being really efficient with it quickly.
And we have that too, right? When people come to me, I had a customer the other day who wanted help migrating Forms to version 12. And then she said, yeah, because we have all these new applications to build. So I was like, okay. I said, if you're in 6i and you kind of have new applications to build, I don't know if that's necessarily the direction I would go. They're like a very big insurance provider and bank. So I said, if you looked into Apex at all, and so everybody was like, you're telling them to go to Apex. I said, I'm not gonna put a round peg in a square hole, or whatever the saying is. If it's a completely new application, I'm not going to tell them do it in Oracle Forms. Then we'll wrap your situation, we'll wrap the Oracle Forms and plug something on top. Like I said, before it all, I think we're all technologists. We all want what's best for the customer. I've been working, like I said, with the Forms community for many years. And no one wants to sell you something that's like not gonna be the best solution for you. It's a big joke in our company that they're like, why am I so stressed all the time? I want every customer to be a customer story. I want every customer we work with to want to like give us a customer story, write up their spec, present with us at conferences. That's like my goal going in, and we do practically, that's what we've done. And I see the same for you, right? I mean, if you go on your website, the case studies menu is like, you need to scroll to get to the bottom of it. And I think that's it, because at the end of the day, you really have to have the interest of the organization at heart, and also what I call manage the customer, right?
Exactly.
If the customer comes in and says, I need to migrate, and you're like, look, you have 1,200 forms, you're with a huge banking system, it's, it's all this complexity. I don't know if that's the best thing for your organization right now, right? Or in one shot, it's going to take you this much money, this many years. Why are you doing it, right? Let's discuss what's the motivation, what are you going to get out of it, what business benefits are you looking to achieve, and then they're going to say to you, oh, we need this one, these 5 screens on mobile. I mean, that's what happens a lot of the time with us, right? When they tell us they want to modernize. And we've just seen so many companies go through it where they're like, no, it's our strategy that we're migrating off. And then 3 years later, they come back and buy within 2 weeks, right? So Elizabeth is our very talented relationship manager. And first she came and she looked at our CRM and she's like, oh my God, she goes, this is crazy. You have no leads. She goes, all of these people are from like 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I said, right, those are the hot leads. She goes, all your hot leads are from 3 to 5 years ago. And she starts calling, and literally within 2 months, she had closed a bunch of those customers for upgrades. And she's like, I've never seen something like this. So when people ask, how long is the cycle of AuraPlayer, right? It's like 3 years and 2 weeks. Like it takes people 3 years to understand their modernization, to try different things, to fail at certain things, for the CIO to change 3 times, because each time they fail, they kick out the CIO. And then you come and you say, I'm not trying to change your entire life, right? And we're saying, give us a week.
Mm-hmm.
So when they tell you no, they really mean not right now.
Right, exactly. So it's like they say not relevant. So you call them in a year and they're like, oh, thank God you called. We're doing a big but we tell them, we say, give us a week and 1 use case and we'll put it on the mobile. And they think we're like on a crack, right? They're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Let's pick 1 use case. Show me in Forms what flow you would like to see running on a mobile. And we actually did that with the Insum team.
Yep.
Thank you, Sylvain. Right.
And we have a demo sometime next week, I think.
He was even more ambitious, right? Because he was creating a new customer, looking up item inventory with an inventory dashboard, etc. I mean, in a matter of days, he had put this whole thing together in Apex. I was we were pretty floored. And if anybody wants to see it, feel free in the comments to put your email. We could send you a little video that he made of it as well.
Or email us, reach out to us or me at AuraPlayer, and we'll definitely connect.
Well, that's a good idea. We should reach out and ask anybody on the chat if we're kind of curious to see who's running Forms, what version of Forms. So go ahead and then put your comments in so we could see who's there today. And then,
use the comments. But actually on that topic, so I think Mia's chat about the work she does with customers is really on point. And I think, our session's called Form Modernization Options. So why don't we sort of step through what some of those options are? We can either use the white paper as a guideline, but we've laid out where we've talked about 5 different options. So do we want to cover those for people who might be sort of lost and not knowing where to start?
The spectrum. I like the
possibilities. I work in Forms and I'm on the spectrum. Monty's new PR statements for the.
Elizabeth is like, no, you didn't just say that.
But it is true that there is a spectrum of options, and one of which is to do nothing. One of which is to completely divorce yourself from your current stack, and those kind of polarizing opinions. What I'm going to say is I really like where we're at and the conversations that we're having with AuraPlayer, because if you look out in the community, if you look on LinkedIn, you look out on Twitter, there's still these polarizing views about the people that are 100% into Forms. Boy, you're going to have to pry it out of their dead hands. And then there's the other people, the other end of the spectrum is where these Apex guys that, which we used to be one of them, that says, we're Apex 100%. Don't be very close-minded, have blinders on. Don't consider all the possibilities. And what we're seeing is the reality sits in the middle, and obviously that's what we're here talking about. But there is this spectrum of possibilities, and it's outlined in the white paper, I think, very, very effectively. Michelle, if we could kind of step through one at a time, those five, I think that would be a great discussion.
Yeah, so the first one, of course, like you said, is do nothing. We didn't really take as an option so much, right? Just because the truth is, if you're on the older stacks of forms, you basically can't even run them anymore in browsers.
So stay within Forms is what just upgrade your version and stay exactly where you're at on-prem. Boom.
Right, because the browsers themselves have basically decided to lock out running Java applets. So if you're in a version that's not 12C, you're going to have a pretty difficult time if you don't upgrade to 12C, because you're very shortly not going to be able to run Forms through the browser. And 12C allows you to run Forms directly on the desktop without the browser. It's still a Java applet, so you don't get any of the benefits of the HTML, lightweight look and feel, all of the web benefits, but at least you could still run your forms, which is a nice benefit. And the truth is, from version 10 and 11 to 12 is not a huge headache. Oh, look at you, upgrade Forms. That's very snazzy.
Forms to Forms, right? So
you guys are so snazzy. Yeah.
See where our graphics budget went.
Well, one of the things also is that we like to propose that actually most of the time, so they're at the latest release, and then the first step, if we want to keep Forms, we usually recommend to upgrade Forms to Forms, just to make sure you're supported and you have the latest version, like you say, getting out of this JInitiator or the web browser. I think that's the first thing to consider if you want to keep Forms, basically.
Is that a pretty, for someone who's not familiar with Forms very much, or that whole process, is that a complicated, is it a risky process, the Forms to Forms upgrade? Or is it generally pretty smooth? My
experience is, Mia, you're the one, you're going to have tons of experience and a good answer for this, but just from the layman's point of view, I was just recompiling the forms, and then there was some minor tweaks that I had to do, like run product, run report object. Some of the report calls were different, but they did a good job of just allowing the forms to be recompiled against the new services. But it's not seamless.
Right. No, you're definitely correct. Like we said, of the later versions, the problem a lot of times what people have is if you're in version 6i, okay, because 6i you're not on a web-based version. The minute you're not on a web-based version, you will then need to practically buy Forms from scratch, okay? Because what happens is Forms 6i was a client-server-based technology. So people bought the developer tool and the runtime environment, but they did not have a server environment. They did not have either WebLogic or Forms and Report services. So what happens is, if they decide to upgrade, even if they've been paying support, they have to purchase Forms from scratch, which is not a cheap thing. I think it's something in the vicinity of $25,000 for a CPU, for a processor. And that's where it gets tricky, because a lot of people, if they're going to be making that heavy an investment in a new technology, that why would they invest in their old technology, right? They're already at that stage in a little bit of a tricky position. So a lot of times that's where we kind of look to Forms on the cloud, which is way more less cost prohibitive, especially if they do it in a hosted environment like Insum provides, or they start doing migrations earlier, right from the start. If you're in version 9 and above, migrating to 12 is not a pain at all. Like you said, it's a recompile. There's a list of things that would need to be changed. We have a kind of migration analysis wizard where we could almost to the day tell what needs to be changed, what functions, what procedures, and how long it takes. So it's not a big issue. And then if they want to lift and shift to the cloud, I'll let you guys speak more on it. But that's definitely where people are heading today with their Forms environments. So they don't have to manage that. So they don't need Ed. It can be managed offsite by Monty and Francis.
Yeah, the lift and shift, I think, is what people want now. They want to move to the cloud, get rid of that, having to manage the whole infrastructure, and then cloud makes it a lot easier to manage those infrastructure and then be more flexible. And like you say, probably it's less expensive because you pay for what you use, basically. So, yeah.
And like you said, I think the worst thing about Forms, especially if you're in these kind of maintenance mode environments, there's tons of companies today that they know it runs, it pretty much runs, it's stable. But if you tell them, hey, we need to start installing versions, I mean, they don't want to touch the thing, right? So doing something like a hosted cloud, hosted Oracle Cloud with a partner that lives and breathes PLSQL and Forms and all the stuff. I mean, that's the natural place to go in order to have them do the installation, make sure it's all working properly, and to be able to stretch it off as well next generation environment.
So option 3. So we've talked about upgrade your forms. We've talked about lift and shift. Option 3 is
the UI UX modernization.
Modernization.
Right. So this is that fertile ground that we talked about in the middle, where you can keep all your business logic and where it lives now, but you're able to put a much better, much more effective front end on it.
So we've been doing really fun stuff with this. Like we mentioned, especially during COVID, where people are like, I need a hospital application where the nurses could go from bed to bed and do patient temperature and fluids and intake. And we need it for an inspection we're having in 3 weeks, right? These are literal customer stories we've had where they basically walk us through the Forms environment. We have a recording toolbar that traces the business process, traces the steps. Any data that they input become input parameters on the mobile application. Anywhere they click with the mouse become output parameters. All the business logics that's triggered on the form itself. So moving between the fields, when new form instance, when new record instance are all fired on the mobile application. But then we develop the new front end. So we have a before and after.
Oh, yeah, I think you sent me some of those things, right?
I did. I think we sent you.
Do you want me to share that? I'm happy to.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let me pull my screen up, and you can talk through it.
One thing about this option is that for eBusiness Suite, that's exactly where we can use that approach of just keeping the whole EBS, of course, back in, and then we can start modernizing some of the UI and giving a better user experience. I think that's all about EBS also, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this is what is Oracle Time and Labor. We've actually done it a few times with a few different types of look and feel. This was Oracle Time and Labor, where they wanted to also be able to have a visualization of the budget, the time that was going to be budgeted on certain tasks versus the actual tasks. And this is for a foreman in the field to be able to log hours in construction sites. So you can go to the next one. This is the second Oracle Time and Labor, and this is for people to be able to just log their hours. Right now with COVID especially, people are working from home. People might not be doing EBS, right? They might not be EBS workers. And these Java applets, people don't have laptops, right? If you talk to people who were working in the field, they don't necessarily work from home. They used to go into the office every day, and now they're on lockdown. How are they supposed to record their hours, right? So this is a really easy way, basically. We took the Oracle Time and Labor and we modernized it to mobile with really easy screen that you could basically fill out your hours worked, search the tasks, the projects, and fill out the hours.
So
just
this
to
is
be
the sort of
clear,
thing that where we're going to work together, right? And we're going to build your front ends for these sorts of things in Apex.
yeah, and then that specific case, you really have an AuraPlayer layer where it calls the forms in the back end, right?
Correct. So both of these are running in Oracle Forms. Both of these are Oracle Forms. The mobile application, when you click a button to save, it runs the FMX. It opens a form session on WebLogic, saves the data to the database through the form business logic, and returns the form's error message, the form's status bar message, the form's pop-up messages, any data that you've requested.
So that's what's nice about this option is like you keep your forms, you don't touch anything. You really are just changing the UI.
Yeah.
And then calling this web services that goes through AuraPlayer, that goes into the FMX, and then and runs the forms and returns the results to the app, right?
Exactly.
So what are we looking at, like HTML5, JavaScript, and CSS screens right there? That
so there's some that's different. If you go one more down, we have an Apex one as well. I think this might be the Apex one. What? Some of them are HTML5, but we had one that we did together. And we have another. Hold on, go back, please. This is the one that was also. I don't know if this is the one. I don't know if you have the presentations. We have a presentation just with Apex use cases as well.
I don't have it at hand, but
these are screens, as you could see. Most of these can be done with any front end or with many front ends, right? Which is also the beauty of it, right? That you could essentially take the same back end application and modernize it with automation or with front end, etc.
Mia, our good friend Mike Ferrante, what does he think about that middle point in the spectrum that we keep talking about, where you just basically upgrade the front end and leave the forms back in place? What's his take on it?
So what's interesting, Mike is working on lots of UI modernizations within Oracle Forms 19. So he's working on being able to doing CSS type things and themes in Oracle Forms. So his philosophy is kind of going to be to stay within the Forms world and use the features that he's offering, which again, to me, that's not that doesn't make any it's not clashing with our philosophy, because since we say that people are still going to be running forms on the desktop, those also shouldn't look gray and like they're from the early 80s, as we've been discussing, right? I still think that we're going to need mobile HTML-based forms in Apex, etc., for offline, lightweight, like you said, modular, and maybe next generation. Even though it's great to have these features so that when you do hybrid applications, right? So number 4 was creating a hybrid environment where you could have Apex running for some of your newer applications and Oracle Forms running for the older applications. You don't want it to look like you went into a time warp, right? You don't want to look like you click a button and then you've gone back 3 decades. So all of these features that he's working on is actually great for these hybrid environments, because you could have a similar theme for the Apex pages as you do the Oracle Forms pages. And when they call from one to the other, they look like the same family of products. And that's what Mike Ferrante is really focused on. What we're focused on is not the canvas at all, right? We're focused on how do we break open the black box of Oracle Forms and provide to you guys a blank canvas to build Apex applications with all of that rich, complex business logic of Forms, or to do it for automation or for whatever other purpose. Like we
So
said.
just to make it clear again, so there's no, we see that there's different options and then we can have a mixed match of all of those things, right? And I saw a question from Justin about how does that work? Because that's actually why we like AuraPlayer so much, is that this gives us an option to run the actual FMX without touching anything in the forms and getting to that functionality straight of, running it. So you don't have to do anything. And I think it's a great option in certain cases where we want to, again, either just change the UI or option 2, or is it 2 or 3? I don't remember. 3. Or have an hybrid approach. We can still leverage those in certain part of the system. If you start building new modules in Apex, you still probably need to access some of the forms functionalities through AuraPlayer. So I guess the question,
Justin had an interesting question about support. If there are any issues with Oracle support calling the using your software.
So it's funny. First of all, we're certified by Oracle. Okay, I have sole source in Montreal. The city of Montreal is one of them, but we have sole source in several countries and cities because we're the only certified Oracle Forms plugin. We have a patent, so we've actually patented the solution of using the Forms protocol as a web service. So that's why Oracle can't even do it for themselves. But Oracle works very closely with us. Mike Ferrante is an incredible champion of Oracle Forms. Before he puts out any version, he tests it using AuraPlayer to make sure nothing breaks and that AuraPlayer can still automate the forms.
Really?
He's incredible. He's incredible. We have once there was something he did. He added a parameter that broke some of the automations. He made it an optional parameter in the Forms config. So it's not like we're some side strange thing. I work hand in hand with the product management. Oracle right now is doing a huge sales campaign with us for EBS to chatbots, to Oracle Digital Assistant. So they certified us. So, part Oracle support, they're fully aware of us. They know of us, and we work hand in hand with R&D with them to make sure that nothing's going to break. And the solution's been around since 2007. We've been in production environments. So
the first part of Jeff's question, though, Mia, said, can you explain how that works a little more? We've kind of been dancing around it, throughout the course of the hour. I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but if you could try to address or provide a concise answer to Justin's original question.
So how it works basically is that AuraPlayer is a product. It's a Java server. It's a WAR file that sits on either Tomcat or WebLogic, and it has the web services running on it. And the web service job in general is to take the input parameters and the URL of the Forms application. And when it's triggered, it basically goes using the URL of Forms, starts a session only on the server side. So it's only on WebLogic, but you will see an actual form session. If you look on the Forms monitoring, it runs the Forms application FMX in the background and returns the information. So it's almost like we simulate the Java applet. We don't need the Java applet. We've interpreted what the Java applet would say to the FMX if it was around, and we have that conversation. So like we said, it's a patented technology, but we're actually running the FMX from a web service from our middleware.
And what's nice, I think, if I may, it also runs on other technologies than Forms, right?
Correct. We run Postgres databases. We run MySQL. I'm still waiting for that demo. I think it'd be super cool to have Apex on MySQL. But we also have HTML-based pages. So in eBusiness Suite, all the iExpense, iProcurement, the HTML applications. And we've even done a lot of pre-built applications. So if you're interested in EBS, we have services already for a lot of the common HR, manufacturing, and sales, like order entry, inventory management, that type of thing.
Where are you taking this thing? I know you said it was originally SOAP and now it's REST. Are you gonna do GraphQL or anything like that?
So right now we're kind of in the automation mode. We're in RPA, robotic process automation. So that's been our real focus recently because, like you guys said, right, your main challenge right now is everybody not being able to automate the Forms application from Apex, right? So let's say you converted half the forms, you have a hybrid environment, Forms is running Apex, with a URL, everything's great, but how do you say, hey, I don't want to bring up the Forms canvas. I just want to push on this button on this form when somebody's in my Apex application when they push on that button, right?
Yep.
And that's what we're able to do with AuraPlayer's RPA, with Aura RPA. You could basically record yourself pushing on a specific button in Forms and then automate that from Apex. So you don't
I think that's great because it gives you another option than creating a whole API and web service and whatnot. You can use whatever is there already and then just call in the background an HTML page or in Forms or whatever. I think that's
yeah, and the way a lot of forms are created with the nav, they're all there's touch points everywhere between these forms, and so when they say put this form in Apex, they still want to be able to communicate back to the 10 other forms that original form with. Right. It's a challenge, yeah.
Yeah.
And so Monty and Francis, so as we're stepping through all of these options, we've talked about Apex a lot and seeing where that can fit in. So this hybrid environment is definitely, I would say one of the sweet spots where we see Apex being relevant. And definitely we've had big large scale forms migration projects where maybe an AuraPlayer solution could have helped ease some of the pain, either as a long-term solution or a stopgap kind of temporary, as we're getting to it. So I think that's this mix and match of the technologies is a great one.
So option 4 is to migrate the whole thing to Apex or to another technology. In our case, we prefer Apex, but it could be
option 5.
Option 5.
Sorry, that's 10, but 5.
Sorry, 5. And then of course I think AuraPlayer comes into play there also because, like you say, if you want to do that over a long period of time, you might need to have some places while you're migrating and delivering in production or sprints or functionalities. You still want to keep forms there for a period of time, so you can leverage AuraPlayer's software just to, as you go along in different phases, to migrate, implement new functionality live, and then move on and get to the results quite quickly in an agile approach.
Yeah, our good subscriber Bill Carlisle asked that question: is how close are we to having this silver bullet, to having this flip a switch and you go from Forms to Apex? We're not there yet, right, Francis?
No, and then that's a question that comes often, and we see some other companies that they say, okay, we'll migrate everything in Java and whatnot, but we prefer to go through, you want to modernize, do it the right way, and then go to that web paradigm. So it's what you want to do is really modernize what you have, not get the forms and then replicate the whole framework in other languages. So our approach is really, we build the tools, we build the processes, the methodology, we scan your forms, we are able to assess, what the effort is going to be, where are the pain points, where are the complexities, if there's anything that's duplicated or things like that. So we do have internal tooling for that. And I think Bill's question is also about Apex functionality of migration. There used to be a forms migration option in Apex. I think it's still there, but all that does basically is again, it extracts everything from the XML and it allows you to see what is there to migrate, but it doesn't generate everything for you. There's no silver bullet. So
I think how do people generate your personalized, customized business logic of your organization? So that's what I'm saying. I think you guys have come as close as you possibly can with understanding what the framework are, what's the forms, triggers, and functions, but to silver bullet somebody's business logic function, right? How do you know what % discount you give your VIPs in this company versus this company? I mean, no one's going to be able to do that for you. And that's another reason why, you guys were a natural partner for us. It doesn't make any sense to take Oracle Forms, put it into XML, and then spit out Java Swing code, where Swing is even more dead than Forms, or spit out the same exact look and feel in HTML, the same exact forms and look in HTML, and it still take, we had a customer speak to us, they charged them upwards of $1,500 per form to do this type of thing over 2 to 3 years, where I showed the screens to Elizabeth, the new modern screen. She goes, "Oh, okay, those are the forms. Can I see what they
What the modernized version.
Exactly. And you know what? There's
It
different
is.
ways of doing things nowadays. You in the back in the old days, you probably would do it one way. Now a simple graph or a web service, or there's new ways of doing things. So you want to modernize.
And
it was 1-to-1, a gray canvas, a blue menu. It literally, because it just took the XML, it literally just recreated it. Again, not the business logic, right? Because it's still going to take 2 years, but the screens themselves. And I sat there, I was like, why would someone go today with swipes and drags and drops and things that you're going to be available to do, have a non-responsive, huge screen, HTML-based application?
And let's not forget, well, if these forms, if these applications are 20, 30 years old, well, chances are your business processes have changed as well, your way of working. So it makes no sense to take your forms and translate them, into a one-for-one. Part of our methodology is also to work with the customer and understand, what their new processes might be like. There's a lot of change management as well, and design forms that, not forms, but applications that are going to help them do their work
But
faster.
you want to bring
more
also
efficiently.
new features. If you look at faceted search, for example, in 22 or 21, well, you couldn't do that with forms. Maybe you could, but that didn't exist back in the time. So now you want to leverage those new features or new graphs or new mobile applications or all those things that you couldn't do in forms, basically. So
I didn't want to interrupt you there, Francis.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Go ahead.
Mia, are you seeing requirements? I know we spoke with a government agency a couple years back at Open World, and what was told to us was that they were told to be off of forms by a certain date. Are you seeing that to be the mandate, or they are because that's not going to allow this kind of front-end modernization?
That's the mandate. That specific customer, I think you said 3 years ago.
Yeah,
he just said that the project's been put on hold again, and he's so sorry, and that we should talk to him in 2022.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, are mandates coming in?
These people, it's not. It's something that when push comes to shove, when they go and they get bids, okay, we had 2 people cancel bids, right? Yeah. They go, they get bids, and realistically, these applications, if you don't do it effectively, like you're talking about, right, that you don't strategically look at the application, say, these are the modules that make sense to convert, these are the modules that nobody should touch because they're on the desktop, you need an understanding of the customer. People come in, they give some crazy number of years, some crazy number of like you said, it's automatic, wizards, and whatever else. Those things, there's no magic anywhere in technology, right?
So the mandate should not be, I want you guys to be off of forms. The CIO somewhere on the top floor corner office says, I want to be off of forms in 3 years. That really that shouldn't be the mandate. It should be, let's do the right thing. Let's convert this module, and this module. Let's be smart about it.
We work with New York City Transit, New York City MTA, and their CIO has worked brilliantly. They said, we want to move off of forms. We need to be working towards moving off of forms, but we need these things to the people. And it was COVID. Yeah. Didn't want all these different employees coming in to get their schedules, going into crew offices, mixing hundreds of people to pick their schedules, to pick their bus routes. And literally within days, we had to build them, crewing schedules, pick schedules, looking at their pay slips, etc. But what they did is for the 3 forms that it was possible to reverse engineer it into the database, they did it. And for the other ones, they used AuraPlayer based on forms. And they're slowly, strategically peeling away the forms that they can. But they're not wasting tons of money, tons of time, tons of effort doing a project to get the exact same look and feel, the exact same business process in the exact same.
And you know what? They're not impacting business either. You don't want to impact your business on top of it.
Yeah, you can't have an interruption of services.
So guys, that obnoxious scrolling that you saw at the bottom is poor Mark's way, because we've been ignoring all his private chats.
There's like,
He's his best at trying to keep us in time, and we're just ignoring him. So
he made a website, me and Monty and Francis. I don't know what he was thinking. We'll be here all week.
Yeah, we have anticipated. Mia, I want to say thank you so much for being part of the Insider today. It was a great chat, and we're really looking forward to doing work with you and Elizabeth, and looking forward to exciting things. It's been a great episode. Thank you, Francis, also for joining us as a participant this week.
Thank you.
So just quickly, what's coming up next? We've got Dimitri Gilis on February 11th talking about PDF printing and all the great things they're doing at United Codes. And then February 25th, we're going to be talking about Apex development with the new Apex service available. We're going to be looking at all the different ways people can be working with Apex. And then, of course, we have instant tips every Friday. So join us tomorrow, Anton and Hayden, and actually we have special guest Shakib Rahman is going to be presenting the tip of the week tomorrow. So please join us here on our YouTube channel. And then the last thing, we at Insum are super excited. We have a very exciting new hire joining us. We can't wait to share it with you. So if you'll join us on Monday morning at 10, we will be introducing her to all of you on Monday morning. Hope you can join us. And that's it for us this week. Thank you so much for joining us. How do we turn that off? Okay, everybody have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Rest in peace, Ed.
Rest in peace, Ed. Yes.
You better hope he's not dead. We need him.
You've been listening to the Insum Insider.